Right, so Keir Starmer and his rancid dishonesty, the man who can't lie straight in bed, lies like a rug, has a list of lies to his name longer than Mr Tickle's arms, as after offering his assent to bombing Yemen last Friday, denied that counted as military action. That'll come as some comfort to the families of the dead Houthis from that inaction then. Accidentally walking into a Paveway IV missile, was it? Well, that was just careless of them, it would seem. So why make such a blatantly untrue statement about the UK's part in following Genocide Joe into battle against the Houthis in Yemen on Thursday night then? Well, what happens when a liar becomes unstuck by their own lies? They have to make a bigger lie up, don't they? That is exactly the position Starmer found himself in, and like all liars, he just kept on lying. But when your lies are contributing to genocide and mass loss of life, why the hell would you vote for such a person to run the country? Right, so Keir Starmer came unstuck this weekend, as his old lies caught up with him, and so he had to make up some new ones. And all of this was to excuse him as the leader of the UK opposition in not opposing the Tories yet again. Nothing new there, but on this occasion it was to back Sunak up by saying he agreed to support Sunak in joining in with the US attacking Yemen, because those blasted Houthis were a threat to Israeli shipping, and frankly there were no depths Biden won't sink to right now in order to keep supporting Israel, despite them having been halfway through their genocide case being presented at The Hague at the very time of this attack, brought against them by South Africa, of course. Now, Keir Starmer came unstuck on Laura Kuenssberg's show on Sunday, of all people to unstick him, over the matter of his support for military action against Yemen, because when you say stuff to camera in this day and age, well, it gets recorded, doesn't it? People keep the receipts, so to speak, and even stenographers like Kuenssberg are capable of pulling people up when that's the case, and the reason this has become such a moment of ridicule for Starmer goes back to when he first became Labour leader. We're still full of promises and pledges that he hadn't quite yet gotten round to breaking, and back in 2020 as this was, when he said, "I would pass legislation that said military action could be taken if first, the lawful case for it was made, secondly, there was a viable objective, and thirdly, you've got to get the consent of the Commons." A lawful case for military action, a viable objective, and Parliament having voted to give assent to such action. That was Keir Starmer's position in 2020. Therefore, by giving his personal support to joining the US attack on Yemen, he's failed on all three of his own points. Making a lawful case for this would be unlikely to stand up in court when Houthi actions are in order to force the end of a genocide. Very much against international law, as that happens to be, funnily enough, and a ruling from the International Court of Justice is expected on this soon. But how can it be unlawful to take action to end ethnic cleansing as the Houthis have? Surely they are upholding international law where the US and UK can be seen to be abusing it. There was no viable objective. It was hit 10 targets and leave, and all it has succeeded in doing is pissing the Houthis off, and they've now decided to place the same shipping sanctions on the UK that they placed on Israel already, screwing up global trade for us going forwards. How is that viable? And thirdly, Parliament has not yet voted on this. It almost certainly will by the time this goes out, but it hadn't done at time of writing, because both Sunak and Starmer will whip their MPs to do so retrospectively. But that isn't the point. Having been confronted by this footage by Laura Kuenssberg, how would Starmer, the warmongering worm, wriggle out of this one? Well, with more lies, of course. Let's dig the hole deeper. Kuenssberg put to him after that clip that it was one of your own solemn promises to your own party members that you would make it mandatory under a Prevention of Military Intervention Act that there would be the consent of Parliament. Have you changed your mind? Well, I would argue, given his track record 4 years on, that he never meant a word he said, because he never does. But he came back with a whopper. He said, "No, there's no inconsistency here. There's obviously a huge distinction between an operation, the like of which we've seen in the last few days, and military action. A sustained campaign, military action, usually involving troops on the ground. That's recognised by everybody. National security must come first. There will always be urgent situations where Parliament can't be consulted beforehand, but the principle that if there is to be a sustained campaign, if we're to deploy our troops on the ground, that Parliament should be informed, there should be a debate, and the case should be made, and there should be a vote. I do stand by that act in principle, absolutely." You liar! Smoke alarms should have been going off in that studio as your wife front spontaneously combusted. How dare you insult our intelligence like that? There's a difference between a military operation and a military action. Because there was no boots on the ground in Yemen, therefore it didn't count. The military was involved, so it was a military action. Calling it an operation doesn't change that. Planes went in, bombs were dropped, missiles were used, 10 Houthi targets were destroyed. It would have been more honest to say it was an economic action instead of a military one, considering it was all for the benefit of Israel's economy, their precious shipping, which their economy relies on, along with billions in US cash. There will always be urgent situations where Parliament can't be consulted beforehand. Sure, I agree with that. However, this wasn't one of them. The only urgency was that the US said, "We're bombing Yemen now, are you coming?" And Sunak decided to ask you before he said yes, which he would have done anyway. This wasn't urgent. It wasn't a matter of national security either, since nobody forced us to put a warship in the Red Sea. If anything, national security has been damaged by this action, since our own economic security is now going to take a hit, as the Houthis will now target British shipping in the Red Sea as well. Due to our flipping the bird to the EU and trade with Europe, this will actually have even more of an impact than it would have had before Brexit, in fact. You haven't achieved anything. The Houthis will just carry on. And as for his Prevention of Military Intervention Act, he still had the brass neck to say he agreed with it. But look out for that byword, in principle. In other words, he will not commit to it. And where Starmer is concerned, you can expect it to never ever materialise. And definitely not in relation to Israel, Zionist without qualification as he is. And if you want to see how good Starmer is at not promising anything at all, here's a brilliant example putting out exactly how he avoids committing to anything.
Coming government. This is a sense of purpose-driven government, a mission that will, is a 5 or 10-year project. The mission, there were 5 of them. The one in relation to
Green Pledge.
The Green Pledge.
We've just had GDP figures today, only monthly figures, but a slight improvement there.
Well.
Of course, Starmer's devotion to military action, however he decides to describe it, he's been agitating for airstrikes in Yemen for the last week at least, as this video will tell you all about. You should definitely watch it next, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.